time, no sense at all, no guiding light, going to explain it.
My name is Bill Docker, and on November 8th, 2025, at the Arlington Street Church in Boston, a group of aging activists came together to have a reunion for the work we did 35 years ago to bring the AIDS Memorial Quilt to Boston. And we chose the church because it was the first place where a quilt was made in the Boston community. They were so supportive of us back then, and they were supportive of us for our reunion. The reunion was held down in the basement. The 12 of us who were active in bringing the quilt to Boston in 1999, we invited others to join us. One was Tanya Nefslusen. She is the executive director of Mass Equality, which is the largest LGBTQ plus organization doing work on all different levels in Massachusetts, and it's connected throughout the United States. And we, as some of the elders in the room, wanted to know what is happening now. And we also invited Michael Dowling. Michael and his group the group is Spoke Art in Boston. They bring the quilt to Boston for World AIDS Day every year for the last 30 years. And we wanted to know how we would be able to help him. The room was filled with joyous people. We wanted to tell our stories to each other. It's one of the reasons why we have conducted the several interviews with people to tell their story to you on this medium. We also wanted to reminisce. We needed to cry. We needed to hold each other, and we needed to be with each other. We opened the program with the most heartfelt song from Patty Larkin, singer-songwriter, that I invite you to hear as this piece moves on. It talks about we are all a part of the thread of life, all of us. What brought us together was also the photos that we had all collected, and we wanted to show each other, the memorabilia that we had that we wanted to share, and we wanted to recognize our friends who were lost to AIDS, that were part of the 12, but no longer with us, like Mel Reicher, Patrick Francis Murphy, Doug Schindler, and Fred Custody. It was the Names Project Memorial Quilt, and I had to say those names, and there are more. For those of you who might not be really familiar or possibly not familiar with the AIDS Memorial Quilt, I invite you to hop on YouTube, type in Names Project Memorial Quilt, and there is a wonderful piece done on Cleve Jones, the founder of the quilt. Cleve is a remarkable man. He was side by side with Harvey Milk in San Francisco during the 1970s, and it was his idea to create a quilt to memorialize those who we lost to AIDS. What started off as one panel grew into hundreds, then thousands, and tens of thousands, and it is now the world's largest piece of folk art on the face of the planet, according to Guinness Book of World Records. It cannot be shown in its entirety any longer, but you can see it if you go to namesproject.org on the web, and you can search individual names, you can search people from a particular community, or maybe the name of the person who made a quilt for somebody that you know. And it's all digitized, and it is a wonderful, wonderful resource. Well, we had in the room at Arlington Street Church were wonderful photos and memorabilia, and you'll get a chance to see some of those a little bit later on in this piece, and enjoy what you see, because they're gone. We will keep their memory alive. The quilt, you will see in some of the interviews, affected all of us in different ways. And my story is that it changed my life. I was not focused on HIV and AIDS before that time, but when Fred and I went to go see the quilt in Washington on the mall the year before, we were overcome. Fred Casati was the first man I ever loved. We were together for 16 wonderful years, and he died in 1993. And we didn't know that he was HIV positive when we were walking through the quilt. And we came back. He became the treasurer of the Names Project Boston chapter. I helped out with fundraising with hundreds of volunteers on the fundraising team, with Debbie Rosenkrantz as my co-chair, and we were told we had to raise $10,000 to bring the quilt to Boston. And we thought, whoa, we're kids. How are we going to do that? Well, we did it because the Boston community was so supportive, so generous, that we went from 10,000 that we needed to 220,000 that we raised. And each of us is proud and glad that the community was so wonderful to us and went deep into their pockets, because we were able to help start 13 AIDS service organizations across New England, particularly for the most disenfranchised, the Haitian community, the Latino community, the women's community, the prison community, and it's still work we are all extremely proud of. I lost Fred, and I had to figure out what was going to happen with my life. And all I can say is that it made me get off any sideline, become active. I guess they would call that an activist. And so there I am after his funeral, going through the newspaper, and I see an ad for the Provincetown AIDS Support Group wants somebody on their board of directors, and they're looking for people to apply. And I did. And for 10 years after that, I helped them raise over $1 million for alternative health services that insurance would not provide. Again, I didn't do it all alone. I was a co-chair at the auction with several other people over those 10 years. And the money that we raised went to all the alternative therapies that help people with AIDS and HIV get healthier, feel better, and it was at least something I could do in the honor of all the people we had lost.
Annabeth Winograd. Do I need to spell it, or is that's good?
No, just say my,
okay.
Just say my name is perfect.
So I heard about the quilt and the big display happening in Boston, and folks looking for volunteers and so forth. I heard it on the radio, and I was at work, and I said, "What is this?" And I called, and what do you need? Well, just come on down. Here's our office. And I showed up about a week before the display, and I basically never left. And I stayed there the whole time and helped and did whatever was needed in the office, at the Park Plaza, tried to take pictures along the way. And then we were going to be helping bring the quilt back to DC. And I got kind of roped in like do-si-do, you're coming with us, to co-chair the display going back to DC, working at Tim Weekly's house, making walkway and getting volunteers and media and getting everything out there. And then after that display, which was just mind-blowing and incredibly powerful, Mel Reicher, who was one of the people leading the whole quilt, said, that was great and wonderful, and it's time to work with people who are living with the HIV and AIDS, and not only the people, afterwards with panels. And I became a founding board member of the Boston Living Center, and I remained on the board doing media relations, getting trained by Ken, who worked on the quilt, and went on to work with the Living Center. And then I moved out to Western Mass after my son was born. And I started working with people living with HIV/AIDS out in Holyoke, Chicopee, Westfield. And I became the director of AIDS Care Hampshire County, which was a program of hospice of Hampshire County and later Cooley Dickinson Hospital. And I did that for many, many years. Worked with the Consumer Advisory Board there. I did statewide HIV/AIDS work. I worked with the Department of Public Health. I was asked to be on their HIV surveillance implementation team, working on confidential HIV reporting because they had only been really collecting data on people who had an AIDS diagnosis. And I worked very actively with our Consumer Advisory Board and with the statewide groups. And one of the biggest honors of my life was I received the Padaway Cohen Award from the Department of Public Health, it was the first time they gave out an award to someone who was not living with HIV/AIDS, but who was an advocate and supporter of the community. And my Consumer Advisory Board at AIDS Care Hampshire County, I found out, had nominated me for it. And I was just blown away. And I continued to work there, I don't know, until I wasn't. And then I went on. But I always remember so much of what I learned, even from those very early days, about media, outreach, press, empathy, just everything. There were just so many lessons, certainly leadership, certainly the confidence building. Like, you're going to co-chair this. What? What am I doing? Yes, you're going to do this. We're going to do it together. And meeting people like Bill and Ken and Linda and so many others who become lifelong friends. And I will say, I just have to add, it also completely changed my musical taste because I'm a devotee of Patty Larkin ever since the quilt. So yeah, no, it's been an amazing journey. And I owe a lot of it to walking in and volunteering and being mentored by all sorts of people. So.
And it sounds like you had it in you, and this gave you a sense of empowerment that you just could not contain anymore, and you had to take it out to the world again.
Probably true. I mean, I definitely did some work, a lot of different leadership posts in college, but I was out of college and trying to figure out what was next, working for my family business. And, I got a college degree and I'm doing this, and it gave me a real purpose, a real direction. It literally changed the trajectory of my life, going on and working with people living with HIV and AIDS. It was not on my bingo card, but it was incredible.
Well, I also think I heard the story where you had other things not on your bingo card about a marriage and children.
And luckily, I got the right bingo card. I didn't know they were there. I had to do a little scratch off. But yeah. Oh, and yeah. Partner of
family during this whole thing.
Yes. Actually, I used to bring our infant, toddler, etc. son to Monday night dinners at the Living Center. I used to put him in a holster or whatever and backpack, and we'd ride the subway and go to the dinners. So yeah, I raised the family through all of it. It's but the quilt and the names in the quilt and the people, it's an incredibly powerful thing that I'm just really glad and honored that I got to be part of.
My name is Stephen Cohen, and I might have been at that very first meeting at City Hall because somehow I ended up as site coordinator for the 88 display, which was this kind of mind-boggling time where the specific days kind of blur into each other. And what really stands out is there are many moments that stood out. Patty singing, the Park Plaza, Les Miserables singing, etc. But the most kind of searing, intense memory is working on a quilt for my friend Vladimir, brief partner for a time. He was another dancer. We were in the same dance company together, Clay Douglas Dance Theater. And I heard that, he passed away, found out from his family he passed away from AIDS. And while I was doing all this work at the Park Plaza, which was a madhouse, there were people in and out, and I was in that office a good amount of the time. Somehow I juggled my job at Lesley University to be able to be at the Park Plaza a lot. And my friend Becky Corman, who came over, and we sat on the floor at maybe 5 or 6 p.m. because the quilt was leaving for DC within very short order. And so although there were all these, not distractions, but really important business to carry on, the thing that absolutely stands out is the sense of working on that quilt with Becky became very simple. There were kind of these African inspired fabrics along the sides with his name going in a diagonal because we didn't have time to do more. So that, and it just says his name, Vladimir. And that was really the profound, one of the profound moments for me. And the one that really I hold on to. Of course, all these people that we lost and all of the meetings and all the rest of it are still like within memory, although some no longer. But that specific time, which was it was personal time, as opposed to political activist group time, that's the profound memory. And now when I hear actually from Tanya that she was a kid out somewhere towards some Worcester, I'm not sure where she was, and seeing this, the what it meant for her, that seems pretty special. And just hearing what the quilt meant for people today, and Kurt's really beautiful poetic summary of the kind of rising from the ashes or being buried in the ashes and recovering the memory, the recollections. That's a profound moment just from today. So that is pretty much my sense that I wanted to share.
All beautiful memories and stories. You also, I think, had a lot of relationships that continued over the years.
Oh yeah,
Found the quilt.
that is true. Yes, although surprisingly not as close as they might have been. I mean, of course, you and I continued to know each other because we both live in Provincetown. But AB and I really haven't been in contact, even though we were co-chairs for the DC 88 display. And I think of her, something that did come out of it was Tim Weekly, who has been long lost. AB has been searching for him for years. Tim Weekly, brilliant artistic genius, and many other talented, multi-talented. I decided to make a genealogical tree to trace him down. And by going through all these articles and genealogical websites, finally narrowed it down to New Orleans, and then posted something on a New Orleans queer website and got his number. So this brought Tim back into my life, into all of our lives. So that's kind of a special thing. It's interesting, the people I remember the most clearly make sense for the steering committee. Those of us who sat with each other every week for months, for years, and then went on to the Boston Living Center. So I think we spent maybe 3 years together. If you look at the first quilt from 88, and then the 89, I think I went down to DC, but can't remember because all my photographs were lost by the photography place. And then we went on to develop the Boston Living Center. So yeah, some of the relationships continued, but it's the legacy that feels really powerful.
Hi, I'm Ken Hurd. I was a member of the original steering committee for the Boston 88 display. I'm here to tell about it. It's not an understatement to say that the quilt changed my life. Professionally and personally, it completely helped define the next multiple decades of my life. I was in my mid-20s when a friend, Mel, invited me to come to a meeting about this project he was working on. I had been out as a gay man for about 10 years at that point. And I have to say, my coming out experience at Boston University, I clicked with a group of fun guys. We actually had a lot of fun. So, my coming out story was fun and bold and promiscuous and all of those really wonderful things that used to be easy to be. And then this disease crept up on us all, and it changed our life. And while I didn't have friends who were immediately sick, I knew as a member of the community that I needed to do something. So when Mel invited me to this party and I learned what it was about, I said, sure. And he was like, well, you do fundraising, right? And I had worked at Boston University's development office at that time a little bit. So I said, sure. A little did I know that, in the next 18 months, I'd be absorbed by this enormous, loving community of people. I think this is where it kind of diverges between the emotional impact and the professional impact. I think others have talked today about the enormous impact we had in terms of we raised way more money than any of us ever anticipated. I think we raised $250,000 during that display. I think we were hoping to raise maybe 50 to cover the initial grants we made. Our initial commitment was to 16 different social service organizations, mostly in Boston, some of them throughout New England. But they were, $1,000 to $5,000 grants. And many of them were for minority or organizations. We're talking almost 40 years ago. AIDS was predominantly white gay man's issue at the time. It was just starting to really penetrate into minority and underserved communities. So for us to be bold and give these groups money was really fundamental to their having some legs to stand on in the early days of the things. Just cleaning up from events, you always got a little residual sweat, So it's not a good event if you don't laugh, cry, or sweat. There was a lot of humor with the quilt. So I think, that was a profound impact on it. And I think it's also important that very few of the AIDS service organizations even wanted to talk about hosting the quilt because they didn't have the resources for it. They didn't know what it would bring to their service delivery model. And this, this ragtag group of spirited activists and mothers and husbands and wives and came together and made this display happen. We had over 65,000 people come to the display on a Father's Day weekend and a heat wave in June. It was unbelievable. We had Les Miserables performed at our opening. It was like totally heartbreaking and moving, but it all just seemed right. It all just seemed blessed, that people stayed in lines for hours and hours. That I actually think somebody was joking before about water just showing up. I think one of the radio stations took care of that for us. But it doesn't matter. It just showed up when we had people totally, and that's what the experience of the quilt was like. You said you needed something and somebody made it happen. On a personal note, or, the professional note, I realized that the fundraising I did through this and having conversations with people about investing in the quilt, because I believe fundraising is investing in a cause, a mission, a vision, a better world. That when I was involved with a mission I could really stand behind, I was comfortable talking to people about making those types of investments. And for some people, $100 is a major investment, where other people can give you hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's almost like it's in their back pocket. But it doesn't matter. You need to invest them in the mission of what you're doing. And I think our mission with bringing the quilt here was to really to help destigmatize AIDS, the people who were living with HIV and AIDS, and to an extent to the gay community, because I think at that time it was all lumped together. And I think by seeing the community that the quilt is, the quilt is a community of people who have passed. The quilt is a community of people who are mothers, husbands, parents, etc., of people who have passed. The group of us who put that event together became a community of activists and people who cared. And I think that people who came from seeing a subway, flyer, or came from church because their ministers said, this is there, check it out. The loved ones who came to the Quilting Bees. I think the sense of seeing that we were a loving community that were willing to take care of our own and fight for them to be acknowledged with dignity and beauty and humor, because the quilt's funny. There's a lot of funny things on the quilt. I think that because of the media that we got and the number of people who saw it, I really do think we had an impact in the greater Boston area, which then means, by virtue of media and everything, greater New England, that there was a sensitivity. There was more compassion, more empathy. I think people were less afraid, more tolerant. I like to hope so. And then getting back to the money talks. And we had organizations that, really did keep up. I became the executive director of the lump sum of money that was left over after we made all of our commitments. And for the next 5 or 6 years, we raised money largely in connection with the corporate community. And our goal was to tap the corporate community to support AIDS services that they might not have through other organizations, because they were a little bit more conservative. Our affiliation with the Boston Foundation was gargantuan in terms of giving us credibility. And so we did that. We hosted one major event with the DIFA New England. DIFA is the Design Industry Foundation for AIDS. We created a tabletop event at the new Boston Ballet building, that DIFA and other organizations still use that model for fundraising. But at the time, it was kind of unique. I think AIDS changed the way we raise money. And certainly the Names Fund in that event, it was one of those ways that it was something unprecedented in how we made an event exciting and people want to come to. I gained a great deal of personal confidence in myself as a strong activist, as a gay man that wasn't going to put up with any shit, and a fundraiser. And I've been able to transfer that to a 35-year career being a senior fundraiser. A lot of it was in the HIV/AIDS community. I was the director of development at Fenway Community Health Center. I was the director of fundraising for the Mass General AIDS Institute, the UCLA AIDS Institute. I worked at Project Angel Food in LA. And, I'm not saying this really to, toot my own horn. It was coming back to the quilt. It was back to that. I have the compassion. I have the innate skill set for whatever reason, and they have a need. And there are people out there who are willing to invest in this. And so that's that's my most profound impact from the quilt. Unfortunately, I had many friends who passed after our display and have been added, and that it always, I think, will be a black period to our community and our history, but we did something about it. We didn't just sit there. So
I'm Jackie Gelb.
I'm Merle Bicknell.
We've been married just about 40 years, going on 40 years in a couple of weeks. And we first saw the quilt when we went to the March on Washington in 1987. We were both organizers to get the buses of people from Boston down to the march. And we got there and we were just so moved by the quilt. It was unfurled on the National Mall in front of the White House. And we looked at each other and we said, we've got to bring this to Boston. And when we got back to Boston, there was an organizing committee, a kind of a gathering for anybody that had been to Washington that wanted to get involved with anything. And so over 100 people came and a group of us formed to bring the AIDS Memorial Quilt to Boston.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing because it was actually a friend of ours who wrote for the Boston Globe. Her name is Susan Wilson, and Susan put an article in the Boston Globe about the march and about the quilt, and said that there was going to be a meeting in City Hall where to help organize bringing the quilt to Boston, and that's where everyone showed up to. Yeah.
And there were about, I don't know how many, 50 people in our group sitting around a circle saying, okay, we've never done anything like this before. We know nothing about this. How are we going to do this? And one of the stories that we love to tell is, everybody sort of was sharing what they wanted to do, what skills they had, and how we could kind of organize this huge display. And one of the people in the group said, well, we need a structure. So, and what I think it's important to say that this was probably the first time that gay men and lesbians really worked together on any political, and it wasn't really political, but any action. And so we were still trying to figure out the two different cultures of lesbians who had been active in the women's movement since the 70s, and gay guys that were really getting active for the first time around HIV and AIDS. And so the guys came back with an org chart that was a corporate structure with a president, vice presidents, a marketing committee. And I thought, oh gosh, all the lesbians are going to get up and walk out of the room because they were sort of horrified by the corporate model. And so I was like looking at everybody's faces and thinking, how do we get out of this? And so I said, instead of a pyramid, could we form a circle? And all the gay guys were like, a circle? How do you get anything done in a circle? And so anyway, we had a lot to figure out with each other, but at the end of the day, it was a spoken wheel model where different people took different pieces of the work. We unfurled the quilt on Boylston Street. There were people that got the city to close the street for us so that we could show the display. There was people that got the Park Plaza, what was that? What's that place called? The Castle. So that we could hang the display. And we would, anytime, there were people that did the communications and got KISS 108 radio and WBZ television to sponsor it with us, and people that did the logistics, and there was a lot of people that did the quilt making. We had quilting bees here at Arlington Street Church, where we are sitting right now. And anytime we thought, oh, we don't know how to do this, somebody would walk in the door and say, I want to help. I remember we didn't know how to hang these quilts from the castle. And a young guy, Tim Weekly, showed up and said, I do museum displays and I know how to hang quilts. And we were all like, oh, thank goodness, because none of us knew how to do that. So it was just this amazing moment of everybody wanting to bring forth what they had to make this extraordinary display happen.
It was really fun is that, getting corporate sponsors for the quilt. So we had, it was Patty Larkin and Bet and Jackie and I went to WBC TV, and Bet had brought, packets, PR packets, and we were asking for a corporate sponsorship, and it was, they were like, who's your PR agency? And we're like, we're just a bunch of volunteers. We don't have a PR agency.
We are the PR.
We're it.
But I think it's important to sort of talk for a second about, it's hard to imagine what it was like back then, but everybody gay men were dying, just young, beautiful people were dying every day. And the rest of the city and the state and the country were terrified of getting AIDS, and gay people were already pariahs. And so having HIV part associated with being gay just was a very, very hard time. And the thing about the quilt that was really obvious from the second you saw it is that it totally changed how you saw the people that were the victims of this. And so, as Merle was saying, it really transformed the city of Boston to bring the display here. It changed how people saw us as gay and lesbian people. It changed how people understood AIDS. It created a sense of a bridge that wasn't there before.
Yeah. And I think, the telling the stories, which is what the Names Project did, I think it really was changed, I think, the whole city and beyond.
We had it on television. There were people making quilting bees that were filmed and shown on TV, and interviews with moms who had lost their sons and men who had lost their partners and everything else.
And so, within 4 days, I think as someone had said earlier today, I think 65,000 people came, which is incredible. And the lines were going around the entire city block. And someone said it actually went around twice, which is incredible. And one of the things that we were just talking about was, so many people came. People came on Sunday morning from church. And that was incredible. And whole families would come. Kids, they would bring their kids, and they brought, the moms and the grandmoms. And it was, one of the things that always was so amazing about when we did this quilt is that we were just a bunch of volunteers. But anytime we said out loud, we need so-and-so that knows how to,
put on a party for the elite of the city. And then somebody walked in the door and said, I know how to produce parties for fancy people. Like, can I do one? And remember I don't even remember who it was that did it, but it was all.
Liz Walker came and was the MC.
Right.
But this Sunday morning, the line was around the city block once or twice. And we were really worried because it was a very, very hot day. It was 90 degrees, and we were thinking about everyone in their church clothes and the grandmothers. And we said out loud, we need to give them water. They're waiting for hours to be able to come in and see the quilt. And it was like all of a sudden we got thousands and thousands of gallon bottles of water and cups and trash bags. And we just went around and we don't
know where they came.
We don't know where they came from.
Delivered them.
Yeah, it was almost like somebody's offering this to us. Oh, we'll take it, and we were able to give. And it was just how the whole, it was just incredible that way.
And I think the power in the quilt is that it's so simple. It's just a person who had a life and had whatever the pieces are of their life that you can put into a piece of art, a teddy bear or a mathematical formula or whoever they were. And it made that person a real person. And then when you walk through walkways of thousands and thousands of people and see every person that is unique and different, and think about who made this quilt for them, and that they were loved by somebody and somebody knew who they were and is mourning that their loss, you can't help but be completely transformed by that. And at that, it's true today, but at that time, it was extraordinary and very transformational for people to see it. And, you know, we had gotten, one of the things that just came to my mind is we decided to put ads for the display on the subways so that people would know about it, besides getting our TV sponsor and our radio sponsor and our, you know, getting it on television and stuff. We also had subway ads, and the city of Boston's, well, I don't know who they are, the Department of Transportation, whoever it was, refused at first to put the ads on because they didn't want anything about gay people or AIDS on the T. And we fought it, and they ended up putting it on, and it was one of the ways that we got lots and lots of people to come and show up.
So it really kind of transformed the city. The city opened up to this whole gay, lesbians working together and taking care of our brothers and sisters.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think it shifted how people understood who we are and what was happening to us as a community. And the other thing that was amazing that's worth talking about is the amount of money we raised. And there was all kinds of creative things that we did. A campaign called Every Penny Counts. We had this humongous tub that you could come, and we just did a campaign with Kiss 108 to say, bring your penny jars. Now, back then, you know, people don't have penny jars anymore, but almost every household, you know, you took you had change in your pocket and you threw your change in this jar, and then you never really, it just sat there, and then you kept putting your change in a jar. And so we put out a call for everybody to bring their jars of coins and dump them in this huge, I don't even call it a bucket. It was, you know, 50 feet tall, and you had to get up on a ladder to dump it in. And families came out with their kids, and lots of kids dumped their coins in, and we raised $30,000 in one day with the Every Penny Counts campaign. And then we hadn't really thought about how it was on Faneuil Hall. That's where we had gotten one of our members of our team knew people in the city and got the city to agree to do this, but we hadn't really thought about how to get the coins out of Faneuil Hall. And there we were with this humongous $30,000 worth of pennies and nickels and dimes. And we were like, oh goodness, what do we do now? And I don't even know how somebody got a Brinks to donate it was Wells Fargo, to donate a truck. They came and somehow took all the coins and put it in the Wells Fargo truck and brought it to the bank. They said, we'll move it, but you guys got to count it. Like, you took the coins and you put it through a machine, and I don't even know. And we had volunteers that spent hours and hours and hours taking those coins and dumping them in through the machine so that we could get our $30,000 out of it. I mean, we were just doing anything we could think of to raise awareness and raise money. You know, the day of the quilt itself, we couldn't believe it. We raised about $150,000 that day in dollars. I mean, it wasn't like fancy people. It was just regular people that came and saw it, and they said, I gotta leave some money. And so they would give $1 or $10 or whatever. And we raised together between all of the different activities $250,000, which then went to organizations that were trying to start to really support people with AIDS at that time. There was a variety of different organizations that got funded.
One of the things that I think people talked about was the urgency at that time. But can you speak a little bit about the urgency of today? I think that you just came from a Names Project reunion. And why was it urgent to do it now?
This moment, you're talking today, is an overwhelming time for us as a country, and as LGBT people, and as just humans. I'm almost speechless trying to even speak to how terrifying this moment is for us. My personal fear of fascism coming to this country is really, daunting. And we all need to take very, very seriously the massive efforts to roll back women's rights, gay and lesbian rights, to crush trans people and children and immigrants. And I mean, we could go on, and people of color, and, take away food from people and arrest people and send troops to cities. And the seriousness of what's happening at this moment is profound. And, it's interesting, like, what does the AIDS quilt have to offer this moment? For me, it's how do we make visible the humanity of people that are being demonized and marginalized, for whatever the differences that make up this beautiful country. And, I don't know what exactly of the quilt we can use now, but I do know that sharing stories and making sure that the beauty of every individual is felt and understood is a tool that the quilt taught us is really, really powerful.
My name is Brad Barnes. Recently changed my name. Originally it was Brad Gamble. And I was living in Washington, D.C. During the early 80s. And when the quilt first came to Washington in 87, I was still living there. And one of my colleagues, I used to work on the Hill, he died from AIDS. And so for me, living in a political climate where, as a young gay man, government wasn't recognizing us, I had extremely mixed feelings between anger and sadness. And so the quilt, when it first came to Washington, not understanding, like, why are people bringing a quilt to Washington and what does this actually mean? I'm like, this is crazy. When people are dying, we're bringing this quilt here. And then, so I got involved and started volunteering. Not knowing, I returned back to the Boston area and living in Boston. And that sadness and anger still was there. And somehow, some way, I found my way to the quilt, the Names Project here, and made my first panel. And when I did that, it changed my life. There was a little Italian lady, Lorraine, that was really key to the process of making a panel for me. Back then, here at this church, Arlington Street Church, we would come together, forget what day of the week, but it was like Tuesdays we would meet, and the 8 of us would make panels. We were all making panels, and we turned them all in together at the same time, and actually it all became the same 12 by 12. So not only we got to know each other, it was very special. And then I noticed, it was brought up earlier today about the women from Boston. If it wasn't for them, our gay men community really would have been hurting more. They were our hero. They came forward and they protected us, especially as a young gay man living on my own in a strange city at this time. It was really scary for me. And so these women were like a big sister or a mother. And so the quilt brought that. And then going on later in life, wherever I moved, it seemed like a chapter would pop up. And I would get involved with the quilt. I was trying to run away from the quilt, and you can't run away from the quilt. The quilt will always come to you. And then moving on many years later, the Names Project Foundation moved from San Francisco to Atlanta. And for them, that was really scary because we lost all of our staff except for one person that moved on, and that's Gert. And Gert's been there since day one. And somehow, some way, I whittled myself into joining the staff as the staff of the chapter coordinator for the U.S. So I had 50 chapters at that time, and Boston being one of them. Lorraine passed away, And so one of my first challenges was to come here to Boston, not to close down the chapter, but to send the quilt back to Atlanta, knowing that this was going to be the last time the quilt was going to be here as a chapter. And so I walked into that room at the Boston Living Center, and I'm so glad, Bill, you brought this up, because in that room, it was just tons of memory. And it was overloading. And the Boston Living Center people couldn't have been any more generous. And they came to me and they were like, what do we do with all this? I said, I don't know. I can't pack this up in a couple hours and send it to Atlanta. But I want to make sure it's protected. Can you at least help me with that? I had no clue where it all ended until today. So thank you for sharing that this afternoon. But what does the quilt mean to you, or mean to me or people? It's life-changing. It can open doors for people to go on with their lives, the healing process with it. And I'm living in South Florida now, a very, very red state, where people are really, really oppressed in some ways in living, fear of their lives, fear that they're going to get arrested when they go out the door. And so we're leaning on the blue states, Massachusetts. So hopefully some of the activities today will be in light that the red states can lean on the blue states a little bit to get us through this. And I'm part of the government part back home with the Planning Council. And so I always say we're writing the last chapter of HIV/AIDS. I still believe that today. There's hope. And I believe what we know HIV/AIDS today is going to be a lot different 10 years from now, that we are truly writing that last book. And I really believe between the quilt and ACT UP, that's what made it possible.
Do you also keep up on the medications that are coming out now to end the scourge?
Well, medication is getting the person to be virulosuppressed. When that person's virulosuppressed, they're not passing the virus on to anybody. So you're truly stopping the virus from going. Then you have PrEP, and people on PrEP, taking PrEP on a regular basis, and like they should be, those people that are on the PrEP are not spreading the virus. So people that are positive, that are on medication, non-suppressed, and the people on PrEP, they're the ones not spreading it. It's the people that don't know their status or in denial or not on treatment. And so we really, Dr. Fauci said it years ago, we have all the tools we need to end HIV/AIDS. We need to play all those tools there. And of course, medication is key on PrEP world or in HIV world.
There is no reason, there's no rhyme, there's only music at a time. No sense at all, no guiding light, going to explain it. But there's this quilted work of art, patchwork like pieces of a heart, living in you, living in every name it mentions, just to keep the love alive, keep the will alive, keep the hope that time will heal the wound. Hold on through the night, you are a part of the thread of life, running through the thread of life.
There is no enemy here to blame. There are no politics in a name. No black or white, no wrong or right. Too much confusion about it. The feeling bottles up inside. Too many tears to try to hide. Words go by, empty of meaning. Got to keep the love alive, keep the will alive, keep the hope that time will heal the wound. Hold on through the night, you are a part of the thread of life, running through the thread of life. stitch we make, with all the love and care we take, start to heal the break.